Now, I have mentioned the word component several times already, but what exactly is a component? Let's understand that next. In React, a component represents a part of the user interface. So for example, a traditional website can be broken down into header, side nav, main content, and footer. So each section is represented as a component in React. As we have seen in the previous lectures, the app was a component which was being rendered as it contained the hello world piece of code. So we also have a component that contains all the four components, which is also called your root. So by that you could actually understand that your root component, or which is also called as your app component, is able to kind of have every other components within it. So with that being said, you also understand that components can be reusable, as the same component can be used with different properties to display different information. For example, you have the side nav which is situated on the left side, and for example you could have the same side nav situated on the right side as well, but the contents can change. So by this you could actually have some components created once but reuse it as many times as you want. So now, for you to understand how components translate the code in our application, a component code is usually placed in a JavaScript file. So for example, app component is placed in app.js. Same way, you have the JavaScript file which has component code present in it. Alright, so a component is basically the code inside the .js file. But what does the code look like? So that depends on the type of the component. So in general, we have two types of component. So one is the functional component and one more is a class component. So as of now, in the market, the function components are pretty much used, and that is something that we need to be focused or learning about in the course. Class components are not that necessary from a beginner's point of view, but I will surely let you know where to learn about them at the end of this course. So what does a function component code look like? Yeah, you might have pretty much seen JavaScript functions. So JavaScript functions are literally what function components means here. So they may accept some input properties and return you a HTML, which describes the UI. And this HTML over here is called your JSX, which will be further looking into. So for now we have some understanding of React components. So let's examine the app component in our example. So if I go back to the VS Code, the first thing that you notice is the file extension, which is .js, right? So .js is a JavaScript file. So if you take a clear look at the code, you see it's a function. You have a function name over here which is being called and it returns something. Yeah, so it's a plain JavaScript function that we are writing, but what you see inside it is a HTML piece of code, right? So this piece of code is actually function component, which we'll be looking even in depth later on, but as you can understand that it's a plain JavaScript function which returns an HTML code. So this is actually JSX. Okay, so this HTML contains a wrapping div tag. So you can see the header tag, an image, a paragraph, a link. So the component is exported from a file as default export. Yeah, this particular piece of line. So export default app. So what we are doing by this is saying that whatever piece of code is written over here, I can make use of it elsewhere. That is how you make reusability, right? So this app can be used elsewhere. So where are we actually calling it? So we are calling it in the index.js, right? So what we are doing, we are importing app from app and trying to render this component. So the back way of doing things you already know, like how it's coming from index.html to JS and app.js. So that being said, you can see that as of now we have only one particular piece of component being rendered, which is your root, which is your app.js. So within the app.js, you can have many other components being called here, okay, by you making use of these exports. Yeah, so in the real world application you can have like tens, hundreds, or even thousands of components. So as React was built by Facebook, so they supposedly kind of have 30,000 components is what the data says. So more the complex your application is, more the number of components you'll generally have. That is how it goes by.